is Longlegs really the scariest movie of the year, or is it low budget Silence of the Lambs? Let's find out.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. The Storm Podcast. Before we get into the main discussion, we know why you're here. Don't worry, we're going to get to that. We're going to give you guys some movie recommendations by telling you the best recent things that we have seen. So, guys, who wants to go first?
So my thing this week, like I've been traveling and visiting family, so I've not been seeing as much as I normally do. But I did catch Vanishing on 7th Street, which is a 2010 post-apocalyptic thriller movie, which is essentially about an event in which kind of the electricity goes out and people just vanish. And there are these shadow creatures stalking the survivors. And it turns out that these are it's kind of a ghost apocalypse kind of thing, where ghosts who live in the shadows are stealing people's life essences and killing them in the process. And they can only do so in darkness. And so the survivors, it's a bit like The Quiet Place, but for light kind of thing. And it's so basically, as long as you are in light, you are safe. But if the light fails, then you are in trouble. And the days are seemingly getting shorter for some unexplained reason. And batteries are running out and generators fail. And the light gets scarcer and scarcer every day. And people have to kind of figure out a way to survive. It's got its flaws. It kind of drags in the middle a little bit. It's got an annoying kid that kind of derails the plot a little bit. But it's got some really cool stuff in there. Like they do some interesting things with the light and shadow thing. It's also like I'm always on the lookout for movies that kind of capture the weird fiction vibe, where something sinister and terrible is happening, and people are kind of just trying to scramble to find out what's going on and just trying to survive. And the more time goes on, the more creepy reality itself seemingly becomes. So that general kind of movie, like The Mist and stuff like that, I'm always on the lookout for, and this is very similar. Not as good as The Mist, but still quite good. So that was my best thing this week.
What was the? Because I know you can bounce off of things if you're not sort of feeling the vibe. What was the hook in this movie that made you want to sort of stay and watch the whole thing?
Like the fact that the apocalypse happens very quickly. It's basically a guy wakes up in an apartment and creepy things seeming like things have happened. Like none of the electricity turns on. His girlfriend should be there, but she's missing. Like there's a note that says, I'll be back in 20 minutes, but it was clearly the night before. And nobody answers the phone. And when he goes out the door, there's just empty clothing just lying on the floor. And like you get these gradual, like it wastes no time getting into it. And I think the first 20, 30 minutes are kind of the strongest. And then it starts to drag a little bit. But I always like this sense of kind of peeling back the onion of a terrible truth, that kind of thing. And there's like this 20-minute sequence where he kind of figures out what happened, more or less. And then he starts, like the main character starts encountering other survivors, and then the plot kind of develops from there. So the fact that it starts giving you clues right from the start, and there's no time wasted, at the beginning at least. That like once, like my hurdle with movies often is that I need to get hooked. And if the movie takes half an hour to do anything, then I'm not hooked. But if I get hooked first, and then it drags a little bit, and then it gets good again, that's a much easier sell for me. And this movie has a really strong start. And that's really what I liked about it.
Cool. Sounds good. I also have been traveling. For any parents that are out there, you know that your weekends are always filled, especially if you're a new parent, filled with visiting too many people. And I spent the last week in Leeds, so I didn't get time to watch too much stuff. I did catch a few more episodes of Dark Matter. I mentioned that in a previous episode. It's still good. Maybe losing some of the initial appeal that it had for me. I do really hate when they do this multiverse thing, and every universe you go to is basically post-apocalyptic, and everything is dead in that universe. I hate when they do that, where there isn't some kind of maybe just like slightly different or some normal universes that they can go visit. They're starting to like figure out how to control traveling through the multiverse as well, which is interesting. I feel like the kind of appeal for me at the moment is, you know, this guy that's been taken away from his wife and kids. There's an imposter in his home that isn't sort of him, and it's just that appeal of that eventual reunion of sort of him going back to his family. I feel like that's kind of what's keeping me going through these episodes at the moment. So that's my recommendation.
Does it feel like it's going somewhere, or is this like a mystery box thing?
It feels like a mystery box things for the moment. I don't know whether there's a bigger picture or a bigger story that they're wanting to tell here. Actually, quite interestingly, so I thought, and I might be wrong on this, I thought that the guy had made a poor life choice and wanted to go and rectify it in sort of the new universe, but it seems like his deal at the moment is he wants to give people second chances at lives in different multiverses. But again, I need to watch a few more episodes to sort of see how that plays out.
All right, let us know how it turns out, because like for me, multiverse stories are either really good or really terrible.
Yeah.
Depending on how they handle the conceit. So if it turns out that they're doing something interesting, then I might check it out.
Cool.
I didn't even watch much either, but I ended up watching a film called Tears of the Sun, starring Bruce Willis. Pretty much a Navy SEAL team, and obviously Bruce Willis, he's like the commander. They go out on a rescue mission for a woman named Dr. Lena, I think, and it's in the jungles of Nigeria. And pretty much she says she doesn't agree to go with them unless they save 70 of the Nigerian residents that are living there, refugees, pretty much, and because they're under attack by the rebels. So yeah, man, there's definitely a tough watch. Hard decisions are made, kind of like human nature kind of kicks in sometimes, and obviously human like empathy kicks in sometimes, or most of the times. And yeah, man, sacrifice, a lot of sacrifice, and just kind of like seeing the soldiers kind of go from ice cold into like just they only had one mission at hand, which was protect Dr. Lena. They didn't care about nothing else. And then obviously gradually you see them getting more softer. You see them be more empathetic to obviously the Nigerian refugees, and yeah, just kind of like I wouldn't say they turn into a family, but they kind of, they become their protectors in a way, you know what I'm saying? And they become their protectors in a way, and they kind of risk their own lives for them. So kind of seeing them going from the just from themselves, as in like this is just a mission, nothing else, into like having a more personal relationship with the refugees and risking their lives for them. Yeah, it was definitely a good emotional watch. But now, hopefully, guys, you will check out the movies that we just recommended for you, because we don't want to be doing this for no reason. But anyways, hopefully, it's time for the main discussion.
So to start off with, maybe we can give a synopsis, like a brief summary. So the story is about an FBI agent in the 90s who is assigned to a satanic serial killer who has been stumping the FBI for years or more. And she then discovers that not only is she making good progress on the case, but it's related to her past. And then it kind of unravels from there. That's the basic idea. So for me, my overall impressions are, and stop me if you heard this one before, but I really liked the first half. I really liked where it was going. And then the story fell apart in the second half. And I don't think the story makes a whole lot of sense, which is a shame, because number one, this is a mystery, right? And mysteries are supposed to have good answers, and I don't think this one has one. And it also gets really lazy in the last 20 minutes, where it just explains the mystery in a voiceover. And I almost fell out of my chair when I saw that, because you can't do that. You can't just explain the mystery at the end. You have to actually have the character actually discover the information and figure it out. And that, like, if that hadn't been there, if there had been a proper ending to this, I think it would have been a really strong movie. But because of that, like it's not quite a mystery box, because a mystery box doesn't have an answer. But it's this thing where you like the appeal of the beginning comes from the promise of a reveal, and then the reveal is junk, and therefore that cheapens the first half. Like, the two can't exist on their own merits. They have to. They depend on each other. And by going this lazy route, this lazy solution, I think it just tanks the entire movie. And this is really a shame because I like the vibe of it. I like the first half when there was an actual investigation going on. It was great. I like the main character, even though she's supposed to be unlikable. I kind of half liked her, and that was enough for me to go along with her. It's got a nice look. It does a lot right. In the first half, I was really excited for it, and then the disappointment set in.
Oh my god. Okay.
I'm done.
This is probably one of my favorite horrors of the year so far. Shock. I agree with a lot of what you said. I feel like the vibe of the movie, like there's just like this like uneasiness throughout the whole movie that is just like there, and you just kind of like feel so creeped out watching the whole movie. Like I don't think I was like ever properly settled at any point of the movie. I do agree with you. Like the final reveal's a bit of a letdown, to be honest. And so I actually watched it twice. The first time I watched it, I was extremely tired. I kept falling asleep watching the movie, so I had to watch it again yesterday. And knowing the ending of it and how it ends, it made me kind of like pay a little bit more attention to sort of know how the mystery was being unraveled. And I feel at a certain point, like at the start, it was being like quite clever about it. It was being really subtle, but then it starts to get heavy-handed in terms of like hinting what's going on in the movie. And I felt that let it down. But I know you said that you half like the main character. I loved her. I thought she was great. I thought she sort of portrayed her character sort of really well. She really sold that the whole. There's something like a little bit off about her. She's kind of like grown up a little bit, sort of weird to that, her social. And again, she's like kind of like grown up secluded, sort of from the sort of outside world. So like she's quite socially awkward in a lot of sort of situations, and I feel like she sort of portrayed that really well throughout the movie. And yeah, I think was it Nick Cage as the sort of the evil villain looked great, performed it well. Again, was very very scary and made me feel very uneasy in a lot of some a lot of the scenes. So overall, I really enjoyed it. Just some parts of it were just a little bit of a letdown.
For me, I think that this film was made victim to what I like to call the artsy film effect, where the standards set by the visuals made the story itself feel underbaked. Because I think this movie is going to be a film that is going to be more recognizable or remembered more for its individual performances rather than the story itself. Let me just start by saying I had over expectations for this movie. When I saw, because this film was like proper pushed to us marketing wise, especially on TikTok. I saw it everywhere. Even when I saw the trailer, I mentioned to Daniel as well, I said the trailer looks amazing. It gives you that sinister, like the sinister version of Silence of the Lamb. So went into this film and I was just excited. Left underwhelmed. Like I said, artsy film is a technical masterpiece. The cinematography looked amazing. It just looked beautiful. Like the shots, just the look of the shots, just everything in terms of like the visual appeal of the film was amazing. But in terms of the story itself, yeah, man, there were times, I'll be honest with you, there were times where I was trying to not sleep. Yeah, it was a hard watch at times. But the story itself, I don't think it needed a supernatural element, because when it was revealed and what was going on, I was like, okay, but what was the point? Like, what was the purpose? I think there was like a lot of times where you wanted to know like how did things come to be? Like, for example, right? With Longlegs, the actual character Longlegs. By the way, like I said, individual performance is freaking amazing. One of the antagonists, Nicolas Cage. I didn't even know that was Nicolas Cage until halfway in the film. I was like, because the person I was like, yo, is that Nicolas Cage? But Nicolas Cage, we'll get into individual performances later. But like Longlegs itself, I think I was more invested in the times where I was like hooked onto the film was whenever I saw Nicolas Cage character come to be. But that's the thing. I was like, those scenes, I was like, okay, how did this come to be? Especially with Nicolas Cage characters, where I think they should have kind of like led into, as in it should be like 50-50. It should have been like, okay, cool. The story revolves around obviously the FBI agent as well as Nicolas Cage thing. Like, should have been 50-50 thing where it could have made the story much better because Nicolas Cage was just that evil person. Whereas, okay, so how did he come to be the character that he was, if that made sense? But we'll get into more stuff later. But overall, I think it was a film which looked amazing, but the story itself was it was disappointing.
So before I saw this movie, I saw 2 reviews from channels I'm subscribed to. One of them called it the best horror movie of the year, and the other one called it artsy trash. And when I saw those 2 reviews, and they both made sense, is the thing, right? Like none of them were just hot takes, right? Both of them had reasons for their opinions. I think that's really a big divide that goes into this, right? This movie is being talked about as the scariest movie of the year, which I don't think at all. It was really unsettling, especially in the Cage's performance, but not that scary.
That's why I'm saying I think it's going to be more recognized. Like, I think it's going to be more recognized for his individual performance because Nicolas Cage definitely delivered when it comes to his character. His character was amazing. Like, he was the best part of the film. He should have more screen time, especially the scene, spoiler section, especially the scene where he's driving and then he's just screaming. I don't know if you remember that scene. That scene was just like, I was looking to the but like literally, I swear to God, the person I was with, we just looked in sync. Like, we're looking at each other like, what the hell is just going on?
I've never heard "Happy Birthday" sung so chillingly in my life. It was like that. That just gave me so much chills when he was singing that as well. I feel like you didn't, because to me this movie was like a bit of a slow burn, and I feel like you probably didn't appreciate that, or maybe wanted a little bit more sort of action in there. But I really loved how like slow it was and how like sort of we were just kind of like uncovering sort of things at the start of the movie where she's like sort of doing these investigations, and like Daniel mentioned, things are progressing now that she's on the case and she's got all these like different intuitions and stuff like that. And of course, you're sort of kind of like learning and understanding a little bit more about her character and this and the other. I thought that was all brilliant, and I thought like that was like all very engaging when watching the movie.
I just felt it's not that I felt okay. I felt that scenes were longer than it had to be. Because let me firstly say, the FBI agent, what's her name? The main actress.
Lee.
She was amazing. I loved her socially awkward vibe that she was giving off. Even the environment that she was living in was socially awkward. So for me personally, her performance was amazing. There was certain scenes with her where it was longer than it had to be, especially the scene when she ended up going to her mother's house. That sequence there for me, I just felt like that was just too long. That was the scene where I was like, I was trying so hard not to sleep. Yeah, so for me, it's not that it was a slow burner because I knew it was going to be a slow burner. It was just that there was just certain scenes with her specifically where it should have been, there should have been like a mixture between her story and more screen time for Longlegs.
But I don't, I slightly disagree about the Longlegs things, because I think what ended up being the reveal was that, in the spoiler section, was that her mother was sort of in on it, and she was in on it because she was trying to protect her daughter, and it kind of like brings up the whole thing of like, what are you sort of willing to do to protect the ones that you love, basically. So I felt like Longlegs being just like this satanic worshiper that's been going around doing evil things is cool, and he's just like any other person. And then sort of the real villain ended up being her mother. But then that's where I feel like the story slightly fell apart, because it got to a point where it was too heavy-handed in terms of like hinting that it was the mother that was involved in this, especially when she's like asking her questions about like what happened around sort of certain dates and this, that, and the other, and she's being like very like purposefully coy on it and this, that, and the other, and like some of like the comments Longlegs making and stuff.
I thought that was because Lee had been targeted by Longlegs, and the mother was trying to kind of block that out. Like, she didn't want to talk about that unpleasant time. That's what I thought. And then the reveal comes that the mother is the real villain.
So were you
actually, this is just Snoke all over again, isn't it? Like, you think Longlegs is this really interesting villain who has some complicated thing going on, and then he's just the guy who created the villain. He is Snoke.
Yeah, basically. But in this instance, I thought it worked well. Again, in terms of like having the mother sort of just like, again, it's like, how much, like, what are you willing to do for the ones that you love? Like, what are you sort of, willing to endure and this and the other? You can see that, like, on her face, like, it was taking a toll on her, but she had to do it to protect her daughter. And I thought that was like, I thought that use of it, of like having the misdirect of that villain because you have this situation, was a better reason for having the misdirect than what they did in Star Wars with Snoke.
Yeah, Star Wars didn't then follow it up with an interesting story or so. But
Yeah.
this like, I genuinely did not see it coming that the mother is the real villain, right? Or real villain, but is the one doing it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think like I mentioned is that I fell asleep during the first viewing and I kept waking up at really bad parts because like I'd wake up and I'd just feel unsettled watching like whatever was going on each and every time and I'd go back to sleep. But that was just because I was like super tired. So maybe I viewed it differently because I'd watched it a second time and I was watching out for I was like specifically watching out for how they unravel it, and it felt heavy-handed knowing it. But I think it's good on your part that you didn't expect it and that you were shocked by it. So maybe
actually, I think it saves Longlegs for me because Longlegs by himself is pretty lame. I thought, like, he's just Nick Cage doing Nick Cage things, and he's just weird and creepy for the sake of it, and there isn't really much else going on. But the fact, and I was going to criticize this kind of as I was watching this, I'm kind of making notes about stuff to talk about, and like, there's this thing where people praise actors' performances if they're just big performances, right? Big, bombastic. And that's kind of what Nick Cage does a lot of the time, is just be as weird and loud as possible. And I don't think that's good acting. Good acting is when you convey the reality of a character, right? Which could be a lot of different things depending on who the character is and what kind of story it is. But I don't know that there's anything interesting going on with Snoke. I was going to call him Snoke, with Longlegs. But I think that actually saves it. That he is not why he does it is not the point, or it's not the story. The story is what the mother did, what terrible things the mother did to protect her child.
Guys, I'm gonna have to disagree.
And how that just one more thing about how that actually she has all the best reasons in the world, and it's still, and I think it's debatable whether it makes her a good person or not, right? Because she was willing to harm dozens of children to save her own. Like, that's not really compassionate. That's just selfish.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to disagree with what both of you are saying. So let me try and get my thoughts. Okay, so in terms of Longlegs not being interesting, well, his performance wasn't really being good because obviously he's just loud and weird, etc. I understand that point, but at the same time, I have to disagree because I think his character was so good in this film for me is because he was a contrast to the tone of the film. So the tone of the film was very sinister, quiet, and dark, whereas he was vibrantly evil, and like you said, he was loud and he was weird. So kind of like, for me, the two and two went together. And in terms of Hervey's point about the mother story, is good that they went into that direction. I still think they could have done that, but for me, I think Longlegs was the hook. So, and kind of like, and it doesn't and the reason why I think they should have kind of like concentrated on him as well was because it would have made the supernatural element, it would have made that element more sense, because I don't think there wasn't a reasoning as to why this evil spirit is making fathers kill their families. It was just a spirit that just existing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, the devil. But it was just,
that's what the devil does.
Yeah, that's what the devil does. But at the same time, it's like, why did he like? I'm sure if we figured out, because usually for example, right, the devil usually approaches you or kind of gets you when you're at your lowest point. We haven't seen Nicolas Cage's backstory as to, like, I think it would have made the story more interesting if we just knew a bit more about Longlegs' backstory, because like I said, he just came to be. So it was like, for me, it was like, okay, the supernatural element for me was kind of like unnecessary, because I was like, okay, he's just a guy that's doing the devil's job. Cool. That's like another Strangers type of thing. You know, with Strangers, it's like, okay, they're just a bunch of murderers killing people for no reason. That's kind of like...
But here we know the reason, right? Because the devil needs to act through people, and Longlegs is the kind of person who will answer that call. Right?
But that's the thing, we don't know. But that's the point, though. Like, we don't know what type of person he was, if that makes sense. Because we know that, okay, he is that type of person now, but we don't know his story, because like with the girl, we're learning her story, right? We're learning her backstory in terms of like how she came to be and why she is like how she is. You can see like she doesn't necessarily, like, for example, her socially awkwardness, right? That's something which she doesn't kind of like reveal why she's like that, but at the same time, those answers are revealed through her mom. Because the way that the mom acts, I'm like, oh, okay, I can see now why the daughter's like this. Because even when they were in the conversation with the like on the phone, I was like, yeah, her mom's kind of weird. Like even though we haven't seen her yet, the conversation with the phone said me, yeah, she's weird, like her daughter, like mother like daughter type ish. So that's why I feel like with Longlegs is like for me, it would have made the supernatural element would have had more of an impact or made more sense for me is if there was like, because they didn't feel like no purpose behind what was happening for me.
So to me, the fact that there is an evil supernatural presence that has a motive and has agency and is making stuff happen in the world, it just needs people to pull the trigger. That solves that problem. Right, because now we don't need to know why Longlegs is picking these families or why he does what he does or why he does it the way he does. He's being told to do this.
It's not about picking the families though. That's not what my issue was with. It was just like how he came to be Longlegs. That was my issue. I was like, okay, that's all. It's not about how he was picking out the family. Yeah, that's cool and all, but in terms of like how he just came to be, is like, who the hell is Longlegs? If he was just a vehicle just used to kind of like aid in the whole devil taking over into the devil storyline, then cool, that's what it is. But for me, that just wasn't good enough.
Yeah, and so for me it worked, right? It's just the thing that sets the story in motion. Essentially, the story is really about the mother. But what I was originally going to get to about the performance was that I didn't think the eccentricities really carried any meaning. So the way he behaves and like all his mannerisms and his speech and his specific actions are all eccentric and weird and loud, but they don't seem to convey any personality behind it. Like I didn't really get the idea that like if, for instance, in that interrogation scene where Longlegs has been captured and they interrogate him, I didn't really get the sense that there's a person there and we are getting information about him. He's just being weird because he needs to be weird. That's that's why I don't consider it a good performance. It's like entertainment, it's entertaining, it's creepy and all of that, but I wouldn't consider it good because it's not really creating a character, right?
Could you say that was the goal though? Because now he's kind of like possessed.
Yeah.
Is he really a person anymore?
I think the fact that he serves the literal devil just means he doesn't need a motive. He needs kind of like, but we can kind of assume that he has a reason for serving the devil, and then he's told what to do. And I think that works. But in terms of his personality and why, like, is that just how he is, or does it say? But it doesn't seem to say anything, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. That's why I wouldn't call it a good performance. Like Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs, like every time he plays with the Jodie Foster character, you get new information about the character, and with every scene you get a more complete picture of Hannibal Lecter. And there's a person behind the performance. And I didn't think the same was true for Longlegs, which is not the same thing as saying that Nicolas Cage did a bad job portraying him. I just don't think there's much to Longlegs himself. He's just purely a catalyst.
But then that kind of aids my point. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the interrogation scene would have been the perfect time to kind of like bridge together what both of you were saying in terms of like where he's like putting on this like bravado, this facade during the interrogation, but maybe when they're interviewing, they say something that maybe like triggers the actual real person behind him, and maybe we discover a little bit more about who the person is behind Longlegs. Because I do agree with you, Daniel, in terms of like it's a sort of kind of not a great performance, but he's like does really well in the role. But then, like as you've just said, there isn't really much sort of kind of like behind that, and I feel like that's maybe where there was just like maybe one missed opportunity to give us a little bit more of who Longlegs is and a little bit more of the person behind sort of like the whole sort of the whole performance that he's putting on.
Yeah, and my thing is just that there's no person behind the performance. That's kind of my bottom line.
Yeah,
I feel. Sorry. I was gonna say I think we're gonna go into circles. I was about to say, so I'm gonna kind of just like pull back on that. But that kind of leads into my question though. So, do you guys think the supernatural element was needed for this film, or do you think they could have just gone the Silence of the Lamb route, where it's darker? Because this film I felt like was darker in terms of in comparison to Silence of the Lamb. But do you think it needed that supernatural type of the supernatural element to it? Do you think they could have just gone without it and kind of gone like a more murder mystery route, or just like, I don't know, a different route than supernatural?
So I think the mystery itself doesn't make any sense. And if that had been the point of this movie, that would have tanked the movie. The fact that there's a real presence there that is really influencing people and is really whispering in people's ears, that I think saves that. But if it's just about the actual investigation itself, I don't think that would have carried the movie, because I think if you just take that part on its own, it's very much, it's almost like a parody of movies like Seven or like these serial killer movies from the 90s, 2000s that it's influenced by. Because like we can go through the specifics, but I just in retrospect, like at the time, it felt like I was there with Lee solving the mystery, but that implies that there's a solution. And if there isn't one, then the whole thing is pointless. So, and I think the movie is not pointless because it comes down to exploring the idea of the devil made me do it, and also the whole generational trauma kind of thing, where children find out the horrible things their parents did for them and then rejecting that. Like I think that's ultimately what the movie is about, and because of that, it's the mystery itself is not as important. The problem is just that the mystery takes up half the movie, or a third of it, or however long it is. Like it really lets you believe that this mystery means something, and that the fact, like the ciphers mean something, and the fact that Longlegs is sending letters to Lee means something, and I don't think any of it does. Like, or it's just dropped at the end, because then it becomes about the mother.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Sorry, Harvey, are you going to say anything?
No, I was going to say I completely forgot about the letters, but then again, it's because it doesn't amount to anything in the grand
Exactly.
in the movie, yeah.
So,
and the movie really like spends a lot of time on this whole thing, like this whole thing about the code and the letters and Longlegs leaving notes for the investigator to taunt them. There's usually a point to it. Like often the serial killer will have some massive ego and has to prove to themselves that they're smarter than the person chasing them or something, right? There's usually some kind of reason for it, even if it's completely psychopathic or whatever. And that didn't seem to be like, for just as one example, why does he break into Lee's house and leave her a letter that she decodes in 5 minutes? Is there a point, or is that because that's what happens in these kinds of movies? Because in
I think
retrospect,
it's just. I think it was just.
Is.
Sorry.
I think what it adds is it adds to Lee's connection to the whole sort of investigation. It's kind of like, and I kind of wish that they didn't show the. I understand why they had it at the start of the movie, but obviously like implying that Lee was a little girl at the start of the movie, because it's kind of shows a clear connection between like her and sort of what's going on in there. And I feel like that's probably the only contribution that I can think that the letters had, is sort of kind of showing that, obviously the FBI haven't been able to sort of decode what the hell's going on, but then she's looking at the letters and she's able to like sort of understand, and she's able to sort of decipher it and this, that, and the other. And I feel like it's just showing more and more her connection, essentially, all for the ultimate reveal of like it's sort of including her mother and her being involved in it from sort of when she was 9 years old. I feel like that's what the purpose of that is serving. But then, is that good enough for it? Is that good enough for the movie to be sort of including that in it? And could they have done it in a different way?
And then the thing about that she's assigned to the case in the first place, and then it turns out she's part of the case all along. Did I miss it, or is there not a reason for that? Like, is it just pure coincidence?
It seems pure coincidence, because there is that one scene as well where he, like, Longlegs says that when she turned 20 or something like that, and she joined the police, like she joined the police force, that the friend of a friend both like laughed how ironic it was or something like that. So it just seemed like it was pretty random. But it did seem that they had like gone to handpick her for some reason. Like she had like that crazy intuition at the start of the movie when her partner eventually like gets shot when he sort of knocks on the door. It seemed like she had
for psychic ability, and is that why they assign her to the case? But why does psychic ability or verified psychic ability get you assigned to that case? Is it just because it's the hardest case and so you assign the psychic to it? Is that the entire thing?
Was it not linked because they were trying to find the father? And her intuition was that the father was sort of camped out in this house, and that was sort of kind of like then linked to all these other murders that were like sort of similar murders that were happening. If I remember.
Was that before she was assigned to the case?
That was before she was assigned to the case, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I remember. Yeah, no, I think she's one of the larger team that just goes to houses, and then she has the intuition, and then she finds the killer this way, and therefore she gets tested, and therefore she gets assigned to the case.
Yeah.
Okay, I take it back. That at least that like I thought initially it was just pure coincidence because she's the protagonist, therefore she has to be on the case. But yeah, I think there's a connection there. Yeah.
Wait, Daniel, why did you say you didn't like her character?
So I said I liked her half the time. Okay. So half the time I was really there with her social awkwardness and her whole like extreme introversion and all of these things. Like there's just her just wanting to be an analyst and look at figures and ciphers and not wanting to deal with people. That worked for me. But then the other half, she seemed like she was doing an impression of her character. Like there was this nervous twitch that she does, and it felt like the director just told her to do that 20 times. Right? Like, so I thought it worked sometimes and it didn't work other times, but you spend so much time in extreme close-up on her that if it doesn't work most of the time, it kind of stands out. And that is not really a big criticism of the movie. It's more like it doesn't quite work.
I disagree on that part. I for me it worked throughout the whole movie, but again it's just like, you know, preference and stuff like that. On that part. But I like especially the scene of her in the bedroom with sort of the little girl when she's being invited to sort of the whole.
It's just weird.
It's just like super weird.
You bring your subordinate to your house at like 1 a.m, and then you make her play with your daughter. What? Yeah. Why?
Sorry, that actually leads me to one of the biggest things that probably didn't work in the movie, or just like didn't make sense, was the investigator's father, like I don't know if it was her partner, but like the other guy that was assigned to the case. Like you're working on this case where people's daughters are dying on specific days of something, or like they all share a similar birthday, and your daughter also has the same birthday as all these other girls.
And the agent you're assigning.
Pardon?
And the agent you're assigning to the case also has a birthday on that
particular day. Yeah.
But no, you're right. Like the fact, like, so with Lee, they might not have known that. They didn't know this from the start. Like Lee figured this out, but she also, I don't know if she says, but that's also my birthday, or something. Unless I missed that seemed to be kind of important. It's just a realization. But yeah, that the fact that the boss does not realize, hey, that's my daughter's birthday, and immediately there's police protection on the family.
Yeah, like that just seems like the most logical thing, and it just seems like that was like a huge oversight in the movie, basically.
And I think that's the point of the story where they stop trying to have it make sense. Like there's already like logic gaps, like how come Lee doesn't have a partner? Why is she going into the field with her boss, right? No, it doesn't really make sense. She should have had a partner, and even if it was just like a cardboard cutout FBI agent guy, right? But logically, they should work in pairs. I think, as far as I know, every FBI story I've ever seen has them work in pairs. And the boss should not go into the field just because.
Her first one did get shot in the head, though, at the start of the movie.
Sure, like, okay, so there's a bad track record, but also, like, it's an organization. Like, it's one of those stories where it's the FBI seemingly consists of 3 people. Like, there doesn't seem to be a larger organization. And like there's people in the background with very limited dialogue, right? And there's like this, I don't know, I think she might be the person in charge of the investigation or something. I'm not sure. And so it's basically 3 FBI agents, right? Lee, the boss, and the lead investigator or whatever. And that's kind of the FBI. And there's never any mention of anything else. There's no mention of any paperwork, or like we need to assign you a partner, but it'll take a few days. So in the meantime, you'll have to make do yourself, and that's when the plot is over, or whatever. Like the movie doesn't seem to remember that the FBI is a big organization.
Does that matter in this movie?
It kind of makes it feel less real. Like you watch like any like FBI procedural, and there's a certain feel to this organization, right? It's not just a guy with a gun. It's like a whole organization that has more resources than the bad guy. It's kind of like, and you can imply this with dialogue, right? I'm not saying they had to hire 20 more extras or something to walk around in suits, right? But it's more comes down to believability and atmosphere. And I think that's one of the ways in which the movie feels a little bit flimsy, where it's just Lee and her boss and nobody else. And they have like we talked about, like they had this scene in the beginning where they start to knock on doors and there's like 10 people in the room. So it's there, but it should be there throughout the movie. And even if there's reasons for why she doesn't have a partner, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, just a small thing, right? So that's not the worst thing about the movie.
So where are you guys leading more into in terms of, like, do you think the negatives the pros outweigh the cons of this film? So do you think it's more of a artsy trash film, or do you think that this is actually one of the best films of 2024?
So I think the people praising it as the best horror movie of the year, I just can't see their point of view, because there's good parts to it, but it's not that good. It's not the best. Sorry.
What would you say has been better this year?
Well, Quiet Place Day 1 was better, for one.
Yeah, I agree.
Horror has not had a strong year, so not many. But like, if it's just the best one because the competition is so weak, that's not exactly praise. Like, people are saying this is so amazing, this is the best movie of the year, the best horror movie of the year, the scariest movie of the year, and I just don't see that. I think it's really quite good, especially in the first half, on atmosphere. Like, one thing it really does well is dread, right? It's got, like we mentioned this, where the camera just keeps zooming, like just keeps these long takes, and it's slowly zooming in, and you expect something to come out of, from off frame, or you expect there to be some kind of jump scare, or you expect to notice something that's been there all along or something, and it almost never is. But this sense of dread, this idea of like a lingering stare kind of thing. Like, in this case, we are the ones doing the staring, but there's also the devil always watching. So in a way, it puts the audience in the devil's position, which is kind of neat. And it also creates this unease, because you think something should be happening, but nothing is happening. And in a different movie, that would be boring. But here, it's I think it's done really well. And even though they do it many times, it did not get old for me. I was legitimately creeped out and unsettled, and it didn't matter that no jump scare came. I think it was like that would have just cheapened it. But the fact that it creates this sense of dread so effectively, I think, is really good. I just wish it was in service of a story that made sense and had a satisfying payoff. Like, I think questions are much easier to write than answers, right? Like, that's why mysteries are so popular, because you see the beginning of a mystery, and you see the questions, and you see the clues, and your mind starts racing, and you start wondering what the answer might be, and then there is no answer, right? Like, there's been so many cases of this. And that's why I think a mystery, in order to actually be worth it, has to have a good answer.
So, Harvey, is one of the reasons why this movie for you was one of the best horror movies you've seen this year, because of the extent a mother will go to for her daughter?
I mean, that's part of it.
One of them. One of the reasons.
Kind of like running back in circles again. We kind of like touched on sort of a lot of the atmosphere in the movie, and sort of Daniel touched on those sort of long takes where you're expecting a jump scare, but you don't get it. And I feel like they actually, not like jump scares, but like some of the more intense moments came when you were least expecting it. So like, again, at the start of the movie, when the guy knocks on the door and just gets shot in the head immediately, like that's like, when you're not expecting it at all, you're expecting just like your typical knock on the door, speak to the family, and kind of like see what the hell's going on over there. Or even like,
I was smiling after that scene, like it was great.
Yeah, that was great.
Because like, I like it when movies just do stuff and don't drag it out, or don't kind of beat around the bush. And just stuff happens, and you have to catch up, and you have to catch up with the main character who's trying to figure out what's going on, has to react. And you have this really boring legwork scene where you expect some kind of exposition, or maybe you expect that somebody who answers the door later becomes important, but no, just knock on the door, bullet in head, It's great.
What was great about that scene is I was like, I expected something to happen, and it did, and I think it executed that well because you expect things to happen, and it's strange because usually when you expect things to happen in a film and it happens, it doesn't really have that much of an impact on you. But for this one, I actually expected things to happen. Like even when she left her house, I just had a feeling someone was gonna go into her house. I didn't know what was gonna happen. I just had a feeling someone was gonna be in the house, and it happened. Especially with the whole knocking on the door. FBI agent gets shot. It was just like the way that those expected scenes were executed. It just felt just those for me. Like I said, I think for me it was a film where it was a moment. It was a moment film where I appreciated moments in this film. So there were highlight moments from this film which I really liked. Just obviously as a whole, obviously underwhelmed, but still. Yeah, sorry. How are you going?
You, because I know you said that you didn't see this sort of like the mother being the actual villain sort of coming. Then, like another great thing that I was going to touch on was when she sort of comes around the car and shoots the FBI agent in the head in the car. Was that like one that you was expecting as well? Because that was going to be like another like example of like where you're not expecting anything crazy to happen, and then it's just like the most brutal killing that you've seen, and she like shoots her twice in the head. Like how was like you guys' reaction to that?
Well, when I didn't see her in the house, that's when because I'll be honest with you, at first I didn't know the mother was involved. Like as in I didn't know she was involved as in like she was an accomplice. I thought she was involved, but like I thought something happened to her as well as the daughter, which is why they're both acting the way that they act. But then when she got to the house and then she wasn't there, I was like, okay. Now I'm starting to like the pieces were starting to fall into place, and then I wasn't surprised to see her behind the car. Like when I saw her, I was like, okay, yeah, she's done, she's a dodgy one. So I wasn't fully shocked, but it was a great scene.
I was surprised that she actually pulled the trigger. Again, and like at that point, the movie did it for the second time, and it still caught me off guard. And I really enjoyed that shot because it just happened so fast, and like Lee has to come to terms with it immediately because she has no idea if she's going to have to kill her mother, 2 minutes from now. And this whole like I think it's the first time we really see her emotional, right? She's always very reserved and she's always very calm, cold, and there she's just shocked, which kind of tells us that she's not a robot, right? She does have these emotions that are just very subdued, and here they just come out, and that I think like that even enhances. So I think the scene works, number one, because it's a twist. That makes sense later on, and number two, it happens very quickly. And number three, it's the one time we get a really. It's not the only time, but I think it's the first time where we get a strong emotional reaction out of a character that previously her personality has been that she has no emotions. So I think it works like that all together. I think makes it work really well.
Guys, I think we might be missing something because I remember you lot were saying how Nicolas Cage character feels a bit like it feels like there's no purpose behind to what he's doing. Like he's a bit random.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment? Okay. So remember the scene where the girl saw Nicolas Cage not kidnap the mum, but tied up the mum.
Yeah.
And then she ended.
It's like when they like overly explaining everything and like essentially explaining the mystery, and get like a flashback where first you got Longlegs outside the house, but then it transitions to being inside the house, and then Lee's behind the door and she opens it and she sees her mother like being like tied and stuff like that with legs, whatever, and then she like shuts the door. Basically, that's the scene.
So, do you guys think that we're missing something in terms of like Nicolas Cage's link to like in terms of like what he was doing, like for example, planting the letters and stuff, was saying there was no purpose behind that, but maybe this was him just trying to kind of like lead to this, the situation that she ended up being in where she had to shoot her mom. So, because like obviously the scene where she ends up closing the door, that kind of tells us, okay, so something's happening to the mom. Because when I saw that, I was like, oh, so shouldn't the mom be dead? So the fact that she's alive, that told me that, oh, okay, so, oh, maybe they should have done that scene earlier because that scene was near the end, right, where the mom's pretty much revealing everything. Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Maybe if they reveal that near, like if they show that flashback scene of when she closes the door on the mom after being tied up, then maybe it would have made more sense as to why Nicolas Cage was doing what he was doing. But because it was so later on into the scene, my point is maybe I'm saying like he was like Nicolas Cage's purpose for what he was doing because he wanted to bring obviously the FBI agent to that point where he's pretty much face to face with the mom.
So
That's
my
the point.
theory is it's not a character reason. It's a meta reason. I think it's a fake out. Because if you have seen movies like Silence of the Lamb or Seven, or even The Dark Knight, like the villain acting in crazy, eccentric, unpredictable ways is the story, right? Where you try to understand why they are who they are and why they act the way they do, and you are invited to make that assumption about Longlegs, right? You are invited to start speculating about what his what his psychology is and why he does things this way and why he kills and what he wants, and then there's nothing there. And I think, like, the more I think about it, the more I kind of like this. When you subvert expectations, you have to replace the assumptions of the audience with something better, right? This is a kind of a lot like Game of Thrones, right? Where the audience is led to assume certain things, and then you do the opposite, and then you convince them that it was worth it, right? And I think a lot hinges with this movie on was the subversion worth it? That Longlegs does not have an interesting psychology, that he doesn't have a personality. He's just who created the mother, or turned the mother into the villain. And I think the reason it doesn't, for me, is because it's told in this voiceover montage. Mm-hmm. If that sequence had been some kind of confrontation between the mother and Lee, where they talk it out and Lee puts all the pieces together, and then in retrospect we see all the pieces assembled throughout the movie, then it would have worked, and then Longlegs would have been the fake out would have been worth it with Longlegs, I think.
So I don't think I've asked you guys, but what for you was like a highlight moment for you where it actually got you hooked? And what would you say was a low light moment, as in a moment where you thought it was pretty much redundant, there was no need for that, or just a moment that you just didn't like?
So in retrospect, the entire case is a red herring, right? The letters, the cipher, it's part of that subversion of you are supposed to assume this is 7 and so on, when it isn't, or not really. And so those scenes are kind of pointless in that sense in retrospect. So a lot of time is spent on them. A lot of time is spent on the process where Lee figures out the cipher and starts decoding the messages, and they wonder about what he might, if this is a clue on what he will do next and stuff like that. And it's kind of noise in retrospect. So that's a little bit of a letdown. In terms of just worst scene, it's got to be the montage at the end. Like, it's shot well and everything. It's just really clumsy storytelling, and I just can't get over it. In terms of best scene, it might be the opening sequence where Longlegs meets young Lee, and we just see him from the chin down, and it's so creepy because we don't we have known nothing about him. We don't know why he's talking to this girl. We don't know anything, but it's wrong. Something bad's going to happen, and that sense of dread. And then he bows down, and that's where the jump scare shows his face, and that's where the jump scare comes. And I hate jump scares, and I thought it was worth it, this one, because it's just so unsettling. That's my best thing.
I'm trying to think of my lowlights, because I didn't dislike it too much. I just disliked how things were being unraveled towards the latter parts of the movie. In terms of the whole her mother being a little bit more coy and sort of showing that she's purposely hiding stuff, and then obviously Longlegs hinting of a friend of a friend and this and the other, and it just seemed again, this was on second viewing, so in my viewing was a little bit tainted watching this movie, but it just seemed too heavy-handed in my part, so that was a low light for me.
For me, I'd say obviously the highlight was where Longlegs was obviously in the car driving, and I don't know what the hell he was saying. It was just that sequence there. It did feel random, but it just gave me that sinister feel that I just wouldn't forget. If you were to ask me what do I remember the film, it would be that scene. In terms of a low light, I would have to say just the sequence where the girl goes back home to her mom's house. I just think that kind of felt a bit dragged. It could have been a bit more touching if it was just a tad bit shorter, but yeah, I just think for that scene there, it felt a bit dragged for me.
I got my highlight.
Your highlight, ready?
In the interrogation scene when he decides to kill himself and starts smashing his head against the table again.
Yeah.
I think that was probably when my like senses were heightened the most, because I was like, what the hell is going on here? Like it was just like so creeped out. I couldn't like properly look at the screen, but at the same time I couldn't look away from it as well as to what was going on. That was like they really got me with that one for sure.
So before we wrap up, like in the last 10 minutes, it's revealed that this is a story about generational trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's both about Lee's experiences as a child that's stuck with her entire life and that she's never quite gotten over, and also the sensation of realizing that your parents have done horrible things for you, like to help you, and you can't live with them and you have to reject them, right? Like it's like you grow up idolizing your parents as a child, and then some people at some point realize that your parents are not good people, and then you have to make a choice between your family and your conscience. And Lee makes that decision in this case in favor of her conscience, right? Did we think that worked? Or does this come too late and there's too little of it and it's not properly built up? Because even in retrospect, I'm not sure the rest of the movie is about that.
I feel like you can see signs of how she grew up. Again, I feel like it's intentional the way that she's socially awkward throughout the movie, and I feel like it's especially like with what Jonathan mentioned in terms of like the conversations that she's having with her mother and this and the other. You can see that there's like hints of, and I think it benefits from the second viewing, but there's hints of her being a little bit messed up by the way that she was sort of like brought up. And I feel like, again, it's quite intentional, like showing her being introduced to sort of like Longlegs at the start of the movie and this and the other. It's just showing like, again, like her being living in a secluded area, like in the woods and stuff like that. I feel like there's enough in there to show how she is as a person. And then I feel like the reveal is this is why she is the way that she is as a person, basically. So for me,
what about what about this idea of kind of realizing who your parents are and finding that terrible?
That one comes a bit
like we kind of see her growing. When we see flashbacks to her growing up, we can see that her mother raised her in a very secluded, strict way. It's not, I don't think it's stated, but you can imagine her homeschooling her, that sort of thing, just protect her from the world, right? Yeah. And then it turns out that she went so far as to kill people to protect her child because it was either her child or somebody else's child. And that, for me, like that theme, that idea, seemed to come not exactly out of nowhere, but if that is the point of the movie, which it seemed to me to be, was there enough build-up and was there enough to it?
I would say no, because again, like as you're watching the movie, you're viewing Longlegs as sort of the main antagonist of the movie, and again, you have that scene where your expectations is subverted. So, I don't believe that there's enough planted in, like I don't believe that there's enough planted in there in terms of like sort of showing the generational sort of trauma from the parent side, in terms of like showing like the negative things that they're doing out of sort of the best interest of their or their perceived sort of best interest of the child. I don't think the message kind of hits you over the head by the end of the movie, but I don't feel like it's woven into the story well enough for it to sort of know. I still feel like it does have an impact. I still believe that it does have like a good strong impact in the movie, but I just don't feel like it's woven into the story well enough throughout the movie. But for me, it doesn't take away from the impact of the message, if you get what I'm saying.
I don't know, but like to me, it feels like the two parts are kind of disconnected. Not entirely, right? It's not like they're completely separate stories.
Yeah.
But like up to that point, even in retrospect, it doesn't seem to be a story about that topic, right? It kind of just it's like a twist ending, and like a lot of twist endings, it's not set up in a way where afterwards you can go in and can see the clues and see the signs, right? Like you're the only one of us who has watched it twice. Did you see anything along that lines?
I mean, I watched it the first time, like I kept like.
You're mostly asleep for the first time, okay? But like,
yeah,
like of all of us, you're most qualified to talk about rewatchability, right? So
yeah,
Anything?
I wouldn't say so. No, I wouldn't say so that you had enough throughout the movie. No.
Okay.
No, I was gonna
So-
agree. I just think there wasn't enough of an interaction between obviously the mother and the daughter for it to come to where it came to in terms of like the message. Yeah, it was just lacking that. But I
Like,
did
it's not even
like
message. It's not even message.
Right.
It's just theme, right? It's just the like this
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah.
Like it seems like the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that the point is that reveal about children realizing terrible things about their parents,
Mhm.
and having to make that choice. And because it's not about the serial killer mystery, right? Because Longlegs doesn't have a personality. The clues don't mean very much. The investigation is not is kind of the focus in the first half, but not after that, and so on. So that can't be really it. So yeah. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. That like there needed to be. I wonder if you watch it again, if there's more clues that's what's going on. Like we do see this whole thing about the mother trying to get her to say her prayers, right? Because prayers protect you from the devil.
Mhm.
But then in the next scene, she says prayers don't do a thing. And when Lee says she hasn't been saying her prayers, the mother is not exactly shocked or scared. It's kind of it kind of comes across like, like somebody who was raised like in a church environment and then lapsed as an adult, and the parents aren't happy about it, but it's not a disaster. But here it's literally about like the devil is literally stalking your child, and saying prayers is the one defense they have. Why don't you drill it into her from day one that this is what you have to do?
Yeah. To me, how that came across was someone that had lost faith or like had broken faith, or like someone that was like super religious their whole life, and then something traumatic's happened to them, and now that they're in some situation and God is nowhere to be like found. So like even though that was like how she's raised, and that's kind of like the default of like keep saying your prayers, this and the other, how she's like maybe like mentally telling herself how she should protect her child from like the devil, is saying her prayers, is like in actuality I'm the one that has to go out there and actually sort of do these things to keep you protected from the devil. So where she's saying like the prayers don't do anything, it's because I have to go, like she has to go out there and physically save her daughter herself, where like praying isn't really doing anything for her.
Yeah, that's probably saying more about the mother than about the child, right? That prayers don't do anything because she's tried and it didn't work.
Mhm.
Maybe? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
any well, like before we this is last thoughts. I'm gonna say last
So
thoughts.
before we get into that, anyone out there, like I felt like they were like quite intentional with like some of like the doorway shots that they were doing, and like how like the doorway would kind of like always open out towards the camera and this and the other, and there was like a lot of like door shots, and I don't know what it means, and I would love to know. Again, I might have been picking up on just like artsy stuff for the sake of like artsy stuff in the movie, but I do feel like it meant something, and I don't know what it meant, and I would love to like read about it or something like that, or someone comment what some of the door shots were meant to like symbolize in there.
Yeah.
Movie.
So I think in the police they teach you that doors are where you get killed, because they obstruct, like that's where attackers could hide.
Mhm.
So they could symbolize some kind of danger or uncertainty.
Okay.
And that rhymes with this idea of where they knock on the door, and then half a second later one of them is dead because the wrong person, where they knocked on the wrong door.
It kind of ties
So
in.
maybe doors have something to do with that uncertainty and that danger.
Yeah. It also ties into like the whole like, because during the investigation they say that like if there's like someone in the house, then their like family are willingly letting them come through the door and this and the other. So it kind of has like ties to that as well. So that can make sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
there's some kind of resonance there, right? Like with the whole thing of you have to be invited in.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that's part of the mythology exactly, but this whole thing of trusting people, letting them into your house, and the door is where you make that decision of life and death and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think there's something there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure, like if I was a literature student, I could turn it into something. But yeah, I think there's some symbolism there about both safety and danger at the same time.
All right, guys. Last thoughts.
Last thoughts from my side. I really enjoyed it. Again, that's someone that doesn't really watch horror movies. This is actually one that I would probably rewatch. This is up there with Abigail for me as like two of my favorites so far this year of the horror movies I've been forced to watch. there's a lot of good about it. Again, really good, tense moments. Again, like without rehashing too much of what we said, Nick Cage is great. Main actor is great. Story, like for the most part, the story is really engaging. I was like really following along throughout the whole movie. And yeah, like the twist, the subversion of expectation, I think works well for the movie as well. I know that's just kind of a bit of a contentious point as well, but for me, there's a lot to like in this movie, and one that I definitely rewatch again. Or if like I know some people that are like super into the horror movies, and I would be like, oh, we should probably put this one on out of all the ones I've watched.
Yeah, I like its style a lot. I like its mood a lot. It's very effective at building suspense and dread.
Mhm.
I just think the ending kills it because that's kind of the punchline. Like if you can tell a joke with a wonderful setup, but if you mess up the punchline, the joke is ruined. And I think that's what happens here.
Yeah.
Like they should really remake the last 20 minutes and have that just be a confrontation between the mother and the daughter. And it all comes down to Lee having to choose between two things she wants, and she can only have one of them. If that's the story, it's wonderful. It's great, but that's not in the movie. Or it's not shown in the movie in this way.
Yeah, I was gonna say the more I think about it, the more it seems like the way that they did the ending with the heavy exposition was more for the audience and not for the actual like main character herself in terms of like going through and discovering and like completing the case that she was working on.
But it's not that complicated. You can absolutely convey this in a few scenes.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
It's not like something that the audience would not get.
Yeah.
Right, like if you've seen Psycho, there's famously a scene at the end where somebody playing like a psychologist explains the plot to the audience because it's a bit out there for 1969. But it's not 1969. Like there's nothing in this movie that is that complicated or that audiences would not be able to get. And even if there is, it's the movie's job to lead them to that point where they can get it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any excuse for the exposition montage.
Yeah.
And it's a really big deal. Like, and the more like I went into this conversation not liking the movie this much, but the more I talk about it, the more I like it, and the more it pains me that the ending falls on its face.
Yeah, and just to know, I'm not saying that the audience wouldn't have got it if they chose a different direction. It just feels like that was their thinking behind it, not like not me excusing some of the decision that they made. It just seemed like they chose the wrong option of the two.
Yeah, and I just can't even see that line of thought. Like I don't see what they would like, how they would look at the plot and say, oh, we can't do this like this. We have to explain this. Just stop the movie, explain it to the audience. Like I don't see it at all. Like there are plots that are really complicated, that where you maybe need an explainer or maybe some extra exposition or something. This is not that. This comes down to a pretty, it's actually a very human thing, right? It's just two people making choices about what they want and what they're willing to do for it. Right? The daughter is willing to kill the mother for justice, and the mother is willing to kill others for her child. That's great stuff. That's a great story. Just tell it properly. That's all I want.
We don't disagree. Yeah, we don't disagree.
For me, I set a high bar for this film, and even though it didn't reach the level I wanted, it was still a film with memorable moments, mainly due to the performance for me. I do love the fact now, obviously, after hearing that, the mother obviously, doing it for her daughter, and obviously the daughter is still following the law. That was a good storyline. It was a good plot, but at the end of the day, like Daniel said, just do it properly. But yeah, for me,
good advice for life in general.
Yeah. For me, it wasn't a bad movie. It just it just didn't deliver. Just that's what I think, just didn't deliver. And like I said, artsy film effect. I think the standards of the visual that was set in terms of like how technically, like just the cinematography, everything, just how visually it looked amazing. So I just think the storyline just felt underbaked in comparison to that. But like I said, it was a film with a lot of good moments and memorable moments. And overall, it wasn't a bad movie. Overall, I think it was above average film. It was borderline a good film for me, just wasn't what I wanted it to be. What would you guys Rate the film.
I'd give
5 out of 6 for ideas, 5 out of 8 for execution.
I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10.
For me, I'd give it a 6.5, a strong 6.5 out of 10. All right, guys. We hope you have enjoyed today's discussion. Please let us know your thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And let us know why. Okay, Hervé?
Yeah, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.
Thank you very much. And we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.